Hello and welcome to our channel, MarshStream, your public performance broadcast platform. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also donate to our tip jar and support the arts and artists of MarshStream by clicking the link below in the description. Check out our website, themarsh.org, for all upcoming live performances. Now, enjoy the show.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here. We love the Marsh, and we're so grateful that the MarshStream has continued and been a part of our community and given performers a chance to perform. And thank you to the Marsh. And please remember that tipping jar throughout the night with the stories you like, because we couldn't share these with you without the Marsh.
Welcome to Tell It on Tuesday. We are approaching our 16-year anniversary next month. So we've been doing this for a while. I know there are some new people. I was glancing through the list of people who are here. So welcome to those of you who've not been to Tell It on Tuesday before, and welcome back to all of you who have been here many times, some of you from our very first performance. Yeah, we're going to have 3 amazing performers tonight.
Well, yeah, we had a great rehearsal and it got me very excited, and it just brought up this whole idea of families and the important people that influence in families. Anyway, but I'll let the stories do that work for you. Our first performer is Lois Kincy. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I should have made sure. Kincy is a writer, was a clown, and is now a storyteller, a graduate of Stagebridge Epic Storytelling Certificate Program. Lois finds the joy of telling happens as she becomes the story, allowing it to tell itself. Any story can be a personal story for the teller and for the listener once we see ourselves in it. She has told at Contra Costa Tale Spinners, at Love Lines, and has been a teller at the lunchtime telling of Stagebridge. And she will be performing, the name of the piece is right here. It's called My Mother's Day Story. So please, let's welcome Lois.
Hello. You know, I am kinship mother. And I'll tell you what a kinship mother is. A kinship mother is a very special woman, because a kinship mother has decided that she is going to be a mother to a child that she didn't give birth to. And just think, once you decide to be a mother, that is a commitment for a lifetime. So this story about kinship motherhood is very special to me, because I told this story at our last Mother's Day tea. And something told me that this story should be shared so we would be known by more than us. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. In 1989, I walked into a room full of courageous women, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, women who had stepped up to take care of their kin, meaning they was raising their grandchildren and other relatives' children too. Because the parents of those children had decided they didn't want to be parents no more. They wanted to live the life they had and was living. Now, these women have stepped up regardless of their age, their health, or their wealth to be there for their children. I had made that decision myself a few weeks ago, and I had, you know, when you make that decision all by yourself and you tell yourself, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know what to do. You get in it, and the honeymoon period passes over, and all of a sudden you don't know what you thought you knew. So therefore, I came into this room. It was a support group for grandparents, grandmothers who were taking care of their grandchildren. I walked in there because I needed some help, feeling alone and abandoned. But you know, I tell you, when I walked out of there, I have never felt alone again. So this story is about me, Grandma, and my granddaughter, Sassy. It's a story of how I became to need to be there. It was, oh, and if you they say there's sometimes you find a story within a story. So if you listen, you may hear another story, the little match girl. So it was cold. It was Christmas Eve, and the wind was blowing and was leaving a chill to the bone cold. And there was this little voice saying, "Candles for sale, candles for sale. Won't somebody buy my candle? I got all kinds. I got Christmas candles. I got all kinds of scents. Won't somebody buy my candles?" But of course, since it was Christmas Eve, everybody was going home for their Christmas party. They didn't have time to stop and buy a candle. I had heard the voice, but I was busy on my way to see Sassy, just like that. I was on my way to see Sassy because I had her gifts all wrapped up in pretty paper, Christmas paper. And it was so much fun. I had to pick them out so I could find the ones that was going to bring excitement to her eyes and joy to her voice and just uplift her to make her happy. As I walked along, I thought about my child, my daughter, and the man she was with and the life they was leading and giving my child, my Sassy. And by the way, we call her Sassy because when she came into the world, she had a little sassiness about her. But of course, because of the life she's leading right now, I don't see much of that sassiness. I watch her as she tries to figure out how come she's being treated the way she's being treated. And like most children, what do they say to themselves? What's wrong with me? What did I do? And I watch her stay there as best I can to keep her safe. But again, like parents, we kind of want to fix it and keep it going because we don't want to take away that responsibility from our child. We get to thinking about how, well, if I hadn't done what I did, I must have did something wrong because after all, if I had done something right, she wouldn't be doing what she's doing. So got a little guilt mixed up in there. And we keep on fixing it and holding it together. So when I got there and I called Sassy, come on, Grandma's here. I got no response. I said, "Where's Sassy?" "Well, yeah, I sent her out there to sell them candles and she better not come home until she done sold them all because I need the money." That was the dad. I looked over at the mother. She can't speak up. Caught up in her own self-satisfaction, she let the child go. And at that point, you have to say, I have done enough, and you let it go, and you turn, and I left that house determined to find my grandchild and take her home to live with me. "Candles for sale. Oh, won't you buy a candle? Oh, please, won't you buy?" I got all kinds. People on their way to Christmas dinner. Oh, she was so happy that her grandma had given her a warm coat, scarf, and a hat to pull over her ears and mittens. So she carried her little basket over her arm, but she was warm. She wasn't cold. And she walked through the snow doing her job, which was to sell those candles. People passed by. Some of them noticed her, some didn't. But then one woman, she stopped. And Sassy said, "Oh, wow, she's going to buy a candle." But you know what the woman told her? "Little girl, what you doing out here? It's Christmas Eve. You're supposed to be at home. Go home." Now, little girl in Sassy's place didn't appreciate that remark much. In fact, it kind of hurt her deeply. Of course, the woman didn't help. She just went on her way, leaving Sassy out there all by herself. Pretty soon it was dark. But Sassy walking along, looked up in the windows, and what did she see? She saw the people partying, laughing and singing, and she saw the beautiful Christmas tree, and she could imagine the kids opening up their Christmas gifts. But most of all, she could smell the cooking food as it floated out the window. And some of it smelled just like something, and it took her immediately into her grandma's kitchen where she was watching her fix her cornbread dressing. Cold breeze woke her out of that daydream, told her that a coat, scarf, and a cap wasn't enough. And she needed to find a place where she could protect herself from the cold. She found a place. She went over and she sat up in it, and she pulled the knees under her legs underneath her and tucked her dress so be tight and keep her legs warm. And she buttoned up her coat, tied the scarf around her, pulled the hat down, and she sat there and she rubbed her hands. And in order to not to be cold, keep her mind off the cold, and not to really deal with the fact of how scared she was, Sassy started using her imagination. She said, now, what would I want for Christmas if I could have? And she says, well, the first thing I'd want, I want to be warm. And then she thought about, well, if I was home, I wouldn't be warm either because of the cold air that comes through the cracks in the windows. And she rocked a little more. And the second thing I would want, I want a Christmas dinner with all the food that I ever wanted to eat, all the food that I like, and grandma's cornbread dressing. And she rocked a little more, and she was thinking, and she was thinking. And you know, I have to say that for a little girl's mind and understanding of life, I don't think she could really put into words what she really, really, really feel and need. So I'm going to take the privilege of speaking for her. I believe if she could say what she really needed, she would say this: I am so scared all the time. All I want to feel is safe. Cold breeze brought her out of that daydream. And she realized how cold she was getting, and she thought about the candles. Then she thought about that daddy. But you know, when warmth and survival come into, you know, they join the two, you put aside all of that. And she took that candle and she lit it. She put it out in front of her, trying to warm her hands. But as she was looking at it, she fell asleep. And in her sleep, her imagination turned into a dream. And there she was sitting in front of the candle. The flame of the candle grew bright like magic, and she looked into it. And what did she see? She was in front of a gigantic fireplace, and the flames was licking and sending the warmth out to her. And just as she reached out to warm her feet and her hands, the candle went out and the fireplace disappeared. Just like magic, the flame came on again. This time she looked in and she found herself in a dining room. And on the dining room table was all the food that she'd ever wished for, wanted, ever tasted, and that food that she'd never eaten before. And in the middle sat this big goose. And she could smell her grandma's cornbread dressing coming out of it. And she says, oh, I want some of that. And again, like magic, the goose jumped up, kind of wobbled over to her. And just as she was about to reach it, the candle went out and it too disappeared. Candle came on again like magic. This time she was in the living room under a gigantic Christmas tree. And on the Christmas tree was a twinkling colored lights. And as she looked up, they looked like they was twinkling down at her. So she reached up to touch them. And just as she reached out to touch them, the flame went out. The tree disappeared, but the lights flickered on up and became part of the night sky. Sassy said, why? Is everything I wish for always taken from me so? And just as she said that, the flame like magic came on again. And she looked into the flame, and what did she see but her grandma? Oh, Grandma, I'm so glad you came. And don't leave me, because just like the fireplace and the dinner and the tree, when the light goes out, you're going to disappear. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to light all my candles so I can keep you with me. So she lit all the candles. But you know, candles do go out. And her dream went back into her imagination as she slept. Now, I've been looking for my grandbaby all day long. I finally found some kids who could tell me where she might be. And there she was. So still, so cold. Oh, I was praying I wasn't too late. I went over, and thanks be to God, I shook her, and she woke up, and she leaped, and she took her arms around me and said, oh, Grandma, I'm so glad you found me. I was so scared. I'm so glad you stayed. I was so scared. I took my coat and I wrapped it around Sassy, and we went home. And on the way home, I told her, you're going to live with me from now on. Later that night, as I was rocking her and we were talking, she told me about her dream and what a wonderful dream it was. But as I rocked her, I could feel her body change. I could feel it getting softer and softer. And by the time I laid her down and tucked her in, I could see the way she was snuggling in the covers, that she was feeling safe. Nobody knows the bliss I have. Nobody feels my joy. Nobody knows the peace I found. Glory, hallelujah.
Yay!
Thanks, Lois.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
I love your storytelling voice. I love it. I love it. It's so just feels so comforting and rich. And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Bridget, did you want to read who's up next?
Yeah, so we've got we have two more performers. The next performer is Judith Dambowic, and her piece is entitled Family Rules. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So Judith is a physical therapist, and she received her diagnosis of multiple myeloma at age 58. It's an incurable blood cancer with no clear and accepted treatment path and a limited life expectancy. She unexpectedly began writing and performing as part of a class to help her manage the new normal. Her first show, Welcome to the Cancer Cafe, had a run at the Marsh last year. And her second show, entitled Family Rules, again demonstrates her strength of writing and performing in ways that are relatable without being melancholy. So let's go ahead and welcome Judith to the stage.
Yeah. This is actually part one of Family Rules. I want to explain my relationship with my sister to you. But Judith, you never talked to us about your dad. Look, Marcy and I grew up sharing a bedroom together. She was older by 2 years and 2 days. Now, my single bed was against my parents' wall. I once used a big pen to try to dig through the plaster, just to get a glimpse of what was happening on the other side, but I was found out before that hole was functional. We grew up at the tail end of Brooklyn, a place called Sheepshead Bay, not far from the water. It's like a small fishing village. At that time, mostly European immigrants. I'd ride around on my bike all day long, peering into kitchen windows. And when I was old enough to ride the elevated subway, I could see into full apartments. I was always yearning to notice what were other people's lives like, because not that much made sense in my own home. Of course, Marcy and I had one of those invisible lines right down the center of our room that siblings often have. I think it was an attempt on her part to set boundaries from her annoying and messy little sister. See, I copied everything she did. Guitar, racquetball, juggling. I was always reaching up, hoping to find something solid. I didn't realize that she was reaching up and away. A typical night growing up around our house at dinner time went like this. First, my dad would exclaim, "I'm going to have the last word." Mom and Sis sat quietly, and then I'd make this little sound like eek, eek. Not even a freaking word, but it was enough for him to stand up, undo his belt, slip them out through the loops, and come after me reiterating, "If you run out the front door, you're going to get hit twice as hard." So I ran into my bedroom, that same room that he complained all the time how messy it was. One day I thought I'd pick it up, so I took like the pocketbooks, little jackets and shirts off the end of my office chair and put them in my closet. He came in that day angry. I thought to myself, I didn't do anything today. How is he angry at me? And then when he went to reach for the chair to find something easy to throw, I saw that moment where his expression changed, and he picked up the chair and threw that at me. I never cleaned my room that well again, of course. Defiant, yes. But it was more like an addiction. It wasn't bravery. I couldn't stop. In fact, I felt stupid, fighting a war I would never win, and I wish I could be more like my sister. Yeah. My sister Marcy, she left home the day after high school graduation. She hitchhiked to Massachusetts. We hadn't had much contact, and when I was a senior in high school, I did go to see her. It was one of those blizzards in Boston, full of snow. When I got to her apartment, she said, "Judy, I want you to understand. You were the brave one. I cowered from him. You stood up to him all the time. And I had to leave because I know if I didn't, that one of us was going to end up dead. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be him or me." In terms of our relationship, of course, we're sisters by blood. But really, we don't have that much in common, and I don't think that we'll be friends. Left out in the alley like a cat, only one notch lower. And then she disappeared, lost to alcohol and pain medications. When I was graduated high school, I also moved out, but I stayed local, working cafes and coffee shops. I knew that one day I would be leaving Brooklyn, that I'd have to find my people, but I had no idea where that would be. And then there was this moment where my mom and dad got divorced, and my mom moved in with her woman lover. And I thought, I'm going to take this opportunity to move back in with my dad. He seemed lost and alone and even vulnerable. And I guess I hadn't given up on the idea that something could be different between us. And it was different, but not with words. It was like a silent truce. And knowing it was temporary, it felt safe and worth it. The day I left Brooklyn in a Dodge Coronet 440 with $400 in 2 suitcases, he stood on the porch. No parting words. I was wondering think I was crazy? I mean, a 19-year-old woman going on the road by herself. I hoped that he was worried about me. I made up a story that he was proud of me following my dreams and my hopes, but there really was no evidence to support that theory. And as I drove off, I ventured to tell him that I loved him. No response. And I wondered if that was the last time that I would be seeing him. So I headed left to California. Only it took me 10 years to get there. I had stopped to fix my car, often having to find like a high school automotive class, run out of money, work odd jobs, and of course, fall in and out of love, because who didn't want to have an affair with somebody who was just passing through? Too far west and too broke, I missed my grandmother's funeral. I'd find one of those phone booths, glass that faced out into nature, and every once in a while I'd call my mom just to check in. I found out that my sister got seriously sober with Alcoholics Anonymous. So I grew up on the road by myself, and I used driving from one hot spring to the other as a destination, a roadmap to follow. Holy Magic Nightmare. That's my dog's name. I found her. She was a little mutt terrier chasing butterflies across the freeway in Detroit, Michigan. Outside of Telluride, Colorado, we arrived at the trailer of Anne, caretaker of the Springs. Anne was 88 years old and had survived 8 husbands. I knocked. Her door opened wide and easily as I heard her say, "My gosh, you're the spitting image of my deceased sister, and today was her birthday. I'm so glad you came to visit. Come in and we'll have some tea. You know, I work for the railroad, and this town here was one of the stops. One day, something didn't feel right, and I put my ear to the track. I could tell that the vibration was different, called ahead to the station master, and saved many lives. The front car had come loose. And then there was a time with my 3rd husband, I went to Alaska. Oh, really wild in those days. Got in a terrible car accident, and they took me to the emergency room. I was hovering above my body when I heard them say, "Declare me dead," and got ready to roll me out. When God said, "Anne, if you're willing to feel all the pain from the accident, you have the choice to re-enter your body." I was a young woman then. Oh, a few days later, that same doc came to visit to check on me, and his jaw dropped open when I was able to tell him every word he had said in the ER room that day. I stayed in contact with her. I sent her simple postcards, always around her sister's birthday. In Olympia, Washington, I met Jasper Martin. I was hitchhiking, and the driver I was with stopped at his organic farm. He was 84 and I was 30 at the time. Our connection felt so strong right away that I often returned to visit him each summer. Hey, Jasper, how come every time we get together, we have some kind of adventure, the two of us? You remember when the bees were swarming? You explained that was, and then we got the neighbor, the beekeeper. He came to get the queen. You said we were standing far enough away, but then all the bees got stuck in my thick braids and underneath your big black rimmed glasses, and we started squishing bees on each other's bodies. You had that tool to get the stinger out and salve. We didn't have any swelling or pain that night. Yeah. This was the way I wanted to feel with a father figure, like we were a team, and I was appreciated. Jasper calls me up just as summer break from San Francisco State. Judith, can you come? I've got a really bad cancer and I don't have long. I'll sending you a plane ticket. Jasper was a theosophist, and they believed that the purpose of human life is spiritual emancipation upon reincarnation. I think he was probably one of the first New Age thinkers I'd really ever met. And we had a brilliant setup. Yeah, there were 3 assistants. 2 of us did 12-hour shifts for Jasper. And the third person took care of our needs. At breakfast one morning, I said, hey, Jasper, you know I don't believe in reincarnation, but what were we? Husband and wife? Father and daughter? No, Judith. Brother and sister. His last day was filled with pain, discomfort. He refused any morphine because he was determined to remain unmedicated, so excited to fully experience what passing would be. Of course, the more I tried to help him, the more uncomfortable he was. So I left the room. There was this large bookcase, and I picked a small magazine off, like picking a tarot card from a deck. Opened it up, the Monthly Theosophist, and there was an article reminding people, if we are with the dying and cannot be fully present in ourselves, it is of higher ethics to leave the room until one can get centered. How can it be? The exact words I needed. Took some breaths and I returned to the room. Just as I entered, Jasper turned and faced me, and he took his last breath. What an honor to be with somebody who had no fear of dying. I also learned from him that many of us spend our lives building families and support around us for when we get older, but it may be a visitor or even a stranger that accompanies you through your passing. Living in San Francisco, I was working on my 3rd career. I'd been a restaurant cook, a digital electronic technician, and I was trying to figure out what my passion was. I did have an experience of my magic hands at about age 9, when my dad, who had terrible sciatic pain, said to me, Judy, could you just try and rub the backs of my legs just to see if that helps? So he laid down on his belly with just his white underwear on. Nothing weird, nothing sexual. Just daddy's little girl getting to do something right. Yeah, I idolized my dad. He was a building inspector for the New York City Department of Hospitals, and his job was to solve construction problems. Often in 15 minutes, he'd solve the problem and everyone back to work. Pretty good for a man who never finished high school, and I never saw him read a book. You see, when he was a teenager, his father fell off a ladder and got paralyzed, and one of the 3 boys had to take up the slack. It was him. Growing up, our phone rang late at night often. House emergencies. He would get up, go, no questions. Oh, he charmed everyone around him with his smile and helpfulness. Now, I remember that we had more chores than most children, other children that I knew. And one day, I was helping him to finish painting an apartment for somebody. It was a long, hard day. And when we got done, he said, "You have more paint on you than on the walls." Oh, that hurt. You see, he thought that I should be proficient right away. And it wasn't until an adult that I realized that making mistakes is how we do learn. A few years ago, I recounted this story to my daughter, and she said, maybe this was his way of saying thank you. Maybe. But back then, these were the words that shattered my self-confidence. Most of you remember the '89 earthquake. I was up on the 12th floor at UCSF as part of the physical therapy program. It's a room with tall glass windows, floor to ceiling, cadavers on tables, and those large glass jars filled with fetuses and body parts soaked in formaldehyde. So not only was I going to die as the building shake back and forth violently, but I was going to be buried in slimy pieces of bodies, and it freaked me out. Physical therapy and medical school do not stop for anything. We were scheduled to put a puppy to sleep and dissect it the very next day, and my study buddy Jim and I said, Even knowing that failing one course could get us thrown out of the whole program, we went to Golden Gate Park and juggled that whole afternoon. Finals arrived for that same semester, and at 4:30 a.m., the phone rang. It was Libby, my dad's second wife. The woman who convinced my dad to throw out all my childhood mementos, my diaries, really important for someone who had so few memories. She called to tell me that my dad died. He'd work every day till 65, never called in sick, retired, moved to Florida with Libby, and died within 2 years of a work-related cancer called mesothelioma from the asbestos he handled. We had shared a few calls during that year of physical therapy school. He was tired from the chemo and softer than usual. I think he was scared and in pain. He told me that asbestos was a dream come true when it was developed, and it made the work so much easier, and none of the workers knew of its danger till much later. After making an agreement with the head of our program to take all my finals on the one day when I arrived back from the funeral, I flew to Miami the next day. There I met up with 3 of his 6 siblings left and my sister Marcy. Seeing her for the first time in many years, we bonded as we greeted those arriving at the house after the service. Accolades for a man most of them had barely known 2 years. "Oh, your father was the only man who got up and gave me a chair. As a room full, other guys saw, no one moved." I love how your father is with Libby's grandchildren. He's soft and gentle and playful. Just wonderful to watch him with his grandchildren. There's a hesitation in the line. Marcy and my eyes lock. "He was a bastard, right?" "Right." And I returned to the line with a smile, remembering how lucky I was to have a sibling. No matter how distant we had been, she would always be the only person who knew my full truth. And my heart opened to her again. At one point, Marcy and I are in the front room, and my nose is buried in my dad's vest, just smelling him. And in walks this tall white man in Florida golfing shorts and a bright Florida shirt, not funeral attire at all. He finds us right away, bends down to our level to speak, and says, "Every Friday night, your dad and I had gin and tonic together. at the bar before we went home to our families. One night, he takes out a photograph of two young girls and tells me these are his daughters and that he loves them very much. When I heard about the funeral, I had to come, because I too have a son that I kept that secret from. He took these huge manly arms and held Marcy and I to each of his sides, gave us a big hug, and then left like an angel. Shortly after that, Libby comes into the room. Judith, what are you doing over there? Are you by my jewelry? Oh my God, are you about to steal my thing? That's it. I want you out of this house now. Even in his death, humiliation is closing in on me. In solidarity, my uncle, two aunts, and Marcy, we left the house, never to return and never to speak with Libby again.
Wow, all of those complicated family dynamics, right? It's the not being able to show it or showing it a little too much. Thanks for that story, Judith. That was really beautiful.
And just how complicated people are, that he had just how complicated people are. Anyway, so thank you so much. Lots to think about. All right, we will end our night. Oh, there's chats. I wanted to encourage everybody to look in the chat, Lois and Judith, to catch your chats, your chat compliments. And meanwhile, I will just let you know we're about to have our last performer. We're very excited. Aundre Herron. We've asked her a couple times, and I'm so happy she could do it this time. Aundre the Wonder Woman, otherwise known as, is a Bay Area comic. She says of her career, I would have been famous by now, but I gotta work. By day, she works as an attorney advising lawyers who represent clients on California death row. By night, she is one of the Bay Area's most popular comics. Steve Harvey described her as a new comic with a funny way of saying things. Since then, she's made a name for herself as one of the best known political comics in the Bay Area, telling truth in a funny way. She has been honored as Oakland's funniest comic on the Strip, the funniest woman in Half Moon Bay, and the winner of the inaugural Russian River comedy competition. A semi-finalist in the 2005 San Francisco International Comedy Competition, she received the 2008 Stand Up for Justice Award for her work against the death penalty. All right, I love reading your bio and learning more. I breezed over it, but just to read it, Aundre, I love reading the bios. Okay, and her piece is called The Matriarch. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you that I'm having an experience of what it must be like to try to direct yourself in your own movie. And that can be a challenge. In 2016, I attended what was then the 50th consecutive anniversary reunion of my family in Kansas City, Missouri, where I was born and raised. And I can say with certitude that if you want to understand my family, you're going to need PowerPoint. My mama wasn't my mother. My great uncle was my dad. My cousins were my siblings, and my sister lived across town. I had a brother in Texas who I only saw in the summers. I had no idea this wasn't normal. My birth mother died when I was 6 years old under what can only be characterized as mysterious circumstances. I didn't know her at all, though I heard a lot about her and I saw a lot of pictures of her, including in her casket. In fact, my first memory as a child was at her funeral, even though at that time I didn't know who she was or why I was there. That was all revealed to me much later. As I grew up, I came to learn that all these characters were related to me in one way or another, but I knew them only by their titles and how they came to move through my life as they went on their various ways. It was only later that I was able to piece together who they were and to fix them in the proper place in my family or my family of origin. There was Evelyn, my mama, who was not related to me by blood at all, and the common law of Ike, the common law wife of Ike, who was my great uncle, but who I called Daddy. There was my birth father, Danny, and a host of aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, neighbors, and ne'er-do-wells, all a part of this group I call family. And what a colorful bunch they were, who came and went at various times, some for longer than others, some only periodically or intermittently, some who I never understood who they were, but who were somehow a part of it. Uncle Sam, King George, Aunt Daughter, Aunt Betty, Aunt Helen, Aunt Ruthine, Uncle Clement, Uncle Holland, and so many more. The characters in my family were like a train running through a station. As they passed, you were told who they were and what relation they were to you. Some you had strong, enduring, and impactful relationships with. Others you saw just once in a while during the holidays or on a short visit when they stopped in on Kansas City on the way to someplace else. They lived all over: Little Rock, Stuttgart, Pine Bluff, Detroit, Chicago, Dallas, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. Seems we were always going on one road trip or another to visit somebody who was real low sick or just traveling through to see one of the siblings, all their children and other kin. It was a whirlwind of people. And while it would have been nice to have PowerPoint, no such thing existed in the 50s and 60s. So you just had to do your best to remember who was who. But even if you couldn't, you just hoped a cousin or somebody would tell you who the hell they were and what they were to you. Back in the day, when children were orphaned like my little brother, sister, and me, it usually was the mother's family who took the kids in. But in my case, it was my father's family who stepped up, and each of us went to live with an aunt or an uncle on his side. Lucky for us, they didn't believe in letting us become wards of the state. So we were raised by our great uncles and aunts who were our grandparents' generation. They were part of the greatest generation and the greatest migration in the US, Black people fleeing the horror of racist violence and lack of opportunity in the South, written about so powerfully and beautifully in Isabel Wilkerson's epic work, The Warmth of Other Suns. At the center of this curious constellation was my great aunt, who I called Mama Mitty, the matriarch of my family. She was born in 1904 and migrated from Arkansas to Kansas City when she was in her 20s, I think, followed by all of her 12 brothers and sisters, except one, my great Uncle Clement, who remained in Arkansas until he was 102 years old. I am well ensconced in middle age, and I have never met anyone like my Mama Mitty. She was a larger than life figure who was not to be messed with. If, as Saddam Hussein said, the US invasion of Iraq was the mother of all wars, Mama Mitty was the matriarch of all matriarchs. She didn't negotiate with terrorists or children. She never had any children of her own, but raised 3 generations of my family, including my birth father, my baby sister, and several of my cousins. As I heard it, the first reunion of my family was back in July of 1966. The account was that it was held by Mom Mitty, and that makes sense. She was absolutely fierce about family, and she loved her brothers and sisters, all who scattered throughout the US during that greatest migration. Mom Mitty saw it as an opportunity to get all of her siblings together in one place with their spouses and their children and grandchildren, the ultimate display of what family means. There would be tons of food, laughter, stories, and remembrances, and plenty of discipline for the young ones as they ran around like crazy and became acquainted and fell in love with their cousins and aunts and uncles and family friends. Of course, my Uncle Sam and his family would have to be there. Uncle Sam was Mom Mitty's second oldest brother after King George, the oldest brother. She loved Uncle Sam dearly. It was well known that he was the only person in the world who could tell her what to do. Not her husband, not her sisters, nobody but Uncle Sam. So of course he would be there with his brood of 12 children and be part of this celebration. They were all together there, even though that side of the family thought a bit too much of themselves and very little of our side. It was never in doubt that that brood would be there to share in the enjoyment of being together. He was married to Morrell Cunningham, who had to be one of the sweetest people I've ever known. The Herron Cunningham reunion, to honor her, the name of the reunion came to be known as Herron Cunningham to honor her memory. And despite some tensions between the two sides, they managed to come together, sometimes more for nostalgia than for love, even if some of them kept their distance. I've been to a good many reunions over the years, and over time, they have become more important and essential to me. It's a pretty amazing thing to think about what we have going, damn near an institution now, kind of a rarity in today's world, modern busy world. Everyone I tell is amazed that our family is organized enough to do this on a regular basis, and that we have this commitment to our relationship as family. It's a marvel and a deeply revered value in our family. We never got a lecture on the importance of family. It's just what we picked up by osmosis, by the things we saw, by the stories we heard, by the way our elders interacted with each other that planted the seed of family. So strong is the sentiment that it is pretty much true that a family member can go to any city in the US, and if we have a family there, you can call them up, and as long as you're not an active known criminal, we'll take you in and bring out the fatted calf. Invariably, a family reunion has you reminiscing about the halcyon days of youth and memories of growing up. When I think about the intricacies and complexities of my family, it's a wonder I could keep it all straight, and even more of a wonder how it all got transmitted. As a kid, I had relationships based in my family that were based not on sanguinity, but on the role they occupied in my life and in the family. Mostly what I remember about my family is that they were larger than life. The fact that they were my grandparents' generation made for a unique upbringing, the likes of which the modern world no longer offers. In my world, children were seen and not heard, literally. You did not speak unless you were spoken to, and the only opinion you had was the one they told you to have. In fact, I don't even think I knew the word opinion until I went to high school, because I wasn't allowed to have one. Not about anything, not about what you ate or where you slept or who you sat at next to the table. They told you what to eat, what to wear, what to say, and when to say it. It sounds oppressive, but for the most part, that was not how it was experienced. Yes, you got frustrated because you couldn't talk back or express your opinion, but the cost of bucking the system was too high, so you soon got over it. More importantly, you had to conceal that frustration, because even looking at my folks in what they thought was the wrong way, that could get you hurt. As my sister often notes, when she was getting chastised by Mom Mitty, she just looked down so there could be no mistake that she wasn't rolling her eyes or acting impudent. Mom Mitty was a fierce disciplinarian, but she always gave you fair warning in the harshest terms you could imagine, especially as a kid. So you could never claim you didn't know what might happen to you. I'll step in your ass up to my knee. I'll kick your ass to your nosebleeds. I'll tear your ass wider than a light gate. We did not always understand what she was saying, but it was sufficiently threatening that you didn't want to chance it. And as surprising as it may seem, we love Mom Mitty like no other, because behind that facade, that threatening facade, was a love of family that could not be questioned or assailed. It was real, and she took the meaning of family to heart. When she was eulogized by my father's first cousin, Maurice, he called her house the young people's house. For the kids and the young adults in the family, Mom Mitty's house was where everything was happening. To the kids, she had the best food around: fruit, nuts, candy, cookies, chips, soda pop, ham, sandwiches, chicken, whatever your heart desired. And Sundays was the day to show up. for the grown-ups, they could count on a great home-cooked meal, and miraculously, she knew how to cook just enough to feed anybody and everybody who came through. It was always serious Southern cuisine: chicken, beans, greens, cornbread, yams, and always Mom Mitty's pies and desserts: peach cobbler, rice pudding, bread pudding, apple dumplings. It was Mom Mitty who got us acclimated to something sweet with Sunday dinner. If you wanted to catch somebody or meet up with a cousin to party or go find girls or do whatever young people did back in the 50s and 60s, Mom Mitty's house was the clearinghouse for players, pretty girls, and hot boys. Thank you very much for letting me share my story with you. Oh, and by the way, just because I know Mom Mitty sounds really scary and mean, I want to show you a picture of her. Probably not.
Oh, turn it over. Yeah, there we go.
Probably not what you thought. But she was a force of nature, no question about that. And as my uncle used to say, she wasn't scared of anybody. I always remember a story he told about how some woman called the house that he was messing around with, and she told her, don't walk on the street don't walk on the sidewalk that goes past my street. Well, she didn't know it was Mom Mitty. The woman chanced it. My Mom Mitty went outside, beat the woman up, beat her, broke her glasses, and of course she had to go to court for that. When she appeared before the judge says, "Now, Miss Murphy, you can't beat up the people walking on the public street. That's for everybody." Mom Mitty's response was, "Just tell me how much I owe, because when I get outside, I'm gonna kick her ass again." So that was, thank you guys very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Aundre.
Sure.
Just listen to you all night long.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
That was sort of spoke to the complexity of families and the people, again, the complicated people, and just how family, just all the nuance, the complicated family structures that we have out there.
Yeah,
Right.
and all of them really we're about the family structure and about, some figurehead in the family who was
Right. They always fit where you think they should fit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, what a great night. And it was perfect that we didn't plan it like that and that had that theme. So thank you all so much for performing with us. We'd love to hear if you have anything else coming up. I want to encourage everyone to read the chat because they're coming in, all the fan mail. So you can check that out. Would love to hear if anyone has, Lois, do you have anything coming up? Oh, can you unmute yourself, please?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I'm taking a vacation from you.
Okay. Judith?
No, working on my second part.
Okay, and are you working with David on that?
Yes.
Oh, I know.
Are you like in a workshop right now that you have a end date? Do you have your performance date for that, or do you not want to let it?
I can go look it up in the email.
I know what it is. It's
What
in
is it? Oh, you know it is.
August. I know it is.
What?
August. It's the Monday and Tuesday that we are supposed to have our performance. And I'm very curious if one of them might be virtual and one might be in person. Who knows? I don't know.
Do you know what dates in August it is?
Oh yeah, they're the fourth Monday and Tuesday. So it's August 23rd and 24th.
Yeah. So hopefully the second part will be on the Marsh that night.
And Aundre, do you have anything coming up?
We can't
unmute yourself, sweetheart. Oh, can we unmute her?
No, she's got to do it herself. I asked her.
Let's see her. Okay, you did.
What I'm having is a lot of.
Oh, there we go. Here you go. Can you start over? Because we hear you.
Well, I just want to say thanks to all the people who showed up. I really appreciate that support. All of us, I think, are trying to get our sea legs back as we come back from the COVID deal. And sometimes the Zoom space can be particularly challenging because you can see faces, but not necessarily hear responses. So I really appreciate everybody who showed up to support us.
We appreciate you. So
I just want to thank Aundre to saying that, because it is a blessing for all of us to be able to come together. When we started Zoom, I said, oh, this is crazy. But, in the long run, it's such a bless to have it, because at least we can see the faces.
True.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And thanks to the Marsh as well.
Yes, yes.
yes, remember to tip the Marsh. The Marsh tipping jar is still up there. And we will see you next month. Support the Marsh, and thank you all for coming, and thanks performers for being here. And Bridget, nice to see you.
Yay, good job.
Thanks for keeping hope alive.
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you all.
You too.
And thank you all for showing up and being a lovely audience.